Commander Sarah Chen stood at the helm of the diplomatic vessel Starbridge, watching the crystalline structures of the Lumini homeworld grow larger in the view screen. The massive formations caught and reflected the light of their binary stars, sending rainbow cascades across the ship's bridge. After 6 months of delicate negotiations, humanity was finally going to meet the mysterious species that had captured the imagination of every xenobiologist in the United Earth Federation. Approaching final marker, Commander, Lieutenant Rivera announced from the navigation station. Lumini Control is requesting we hold position for escort. Sarah nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral despite the excitement bubbling beneath her carefully maintained diplomatic facade. Acknowledged. Full stop and maintain position. She smoothed down her dress uniform, a habit from her early days at the diplomatic corps that surfaced whenever her nerves threatened to get the better of her. The Lumini were unlike any species humanity had encountered in their century of space exploration. Their bodies were partially crystalline, allowing them to absorb and redirect energy in ways that defied conventional biology. Initial probe readings suggested their civilization had mastered crystal-based technology millennia before humans had discovered electricity. A flash of light announced the arrival of their escort, 3 Lumini vessels that seemed to have been grown rather than built, their crystalline hulls pulsing with internal energy. The lead ship's transmission came through with perfect clarity, despite the vast differences in their communication technologies. Starbridge, this is Royal Guard Escort Prism 9. Welcome to Crystallos. Please follow our guidance pattern to the primary spire. Deviation will be considered hostile action. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and gave the order to follow. As they descended through the crystalline atmosphere, the true scale of Lumini architecture became apparent. Massive spires of living crystal stretched kilometers into the sky, connected by bridges that seemed impossibly delicate yet bore steady streams of traffic. The primary spire, seat of the Lumini royal family, dwarfed everything around it. Its faceted surfaces contained every color imaginable, and some Sarah's human eyes couldn't quite process. The landing pad extended from the spire like a perfect geometric flower, its petals adjusting to accommodate the Starbridge's whole configuration. Final approach looking good, Rivera reported. Structural integrity field is compensating for the crystalline resonance. Sarah had barely finished acknowledging the report when First Contact Officer Dr. Evans rushed onto the bridge, his usual composure shattered. Commander, we have a situation. The Lumini, they're sending the princess to greet us. I don't see the problem, Doctor. We expected to meet with royal representatives. Evans ran a hand through his gray hair, a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was deeply worried. You don't understand. Princess Thylara is different. Her touch can crystallize organic matter instantly. She's feared even among her own people. This could be a test, or worse, a trap. Sarah felt her diplomatic training kick in, mind already racing through potential scenarios and responses. Or it could be a show of trust. They must know we'd have this information. She turned to address the bridge crew. Standard diplomatic protocols remain in effect. I'll greet the princess personally. The airlock cycled, equalizing atmosphere and pressure. Sarah stood at the head of the reception line, her heart pounding but her expression serene. The inner doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing their Lumini guests. Princess Thylara entered first, and Sarah had to remind herself to breathe. The princess was living art. Her crystalline form caught and reflected light in ways that created ever-shifting patterns around her. Unlike other Lumini, whose crystalline aspects were limited to their outer layers, Thylara seemed to be made entirely of living crystal, transparent enough that Sarah could see energy flowing through her like liquid starlight. The princess's escorts maintained a noticeable distance from her, their movements careful and coordinated. Sarah recognized fear in their body language, despite their alien nature. But it was Tylara's eyes that captured her attention. Deep pools of swirling energy that held an unmistakable loneliness. Sarah stepped forward, ignoring Dr. Evans's sharp intake of breath. She bowed precisely as the diplomatic briefings had instructed, hands open at her sides in the Lumini gesture of peaceful intent. Your Highness, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation. Welcome aboard the Starbridge. Silara's response came in perfect standard English, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Commander Chen, your welcome honors us. She raised her crystalline hands in what Sarah recognized as the royal greeting gesture, light playing across her surface in patterns that the briefings had said indicated positive emotions. Though I sense your people's fear, perhaps you know of my condition. Sarah straightened, meeting those swirling eyes directly. We know that you are unique, Your Highness. Humanity has learned to see uniqueness as an opportunity rather than a threat. She took another step forward, closing the distance that Silara's own people maintained. We look forward to learning from each other. Something flickered in Silara's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hope. The energy patterns within her crystalline form shifted, creating new colors that Sarah's human eyes struggled to process. Brave words, Commander. Most species refuse to even share the same space as me, let alone seek to learn. Then most species have missed an opportunity, Your Highness. Sarah gestured toward the conference room. Would you join me for a more private discussion? I believe we have much to talk about. As they walked together, Sarah noticed the subtle shifts in Silara's energy patterns, the way her light seemed to reach out before pulling back. Like someone who had been burned too many times by offered friendship, the commander made a silent promise to herself. She would show this remarkable being that humanity could see past fear to the person beneath. Little did Sarah know that this meeting would set in motion events that would change both their species forever, beginning a story that would be told across the stars for generations to come. 3 weeks into the diplomatic mission, Sarah found herself growing increasingly fascinated by the complexities of Lumini society. The primary spire, which she'd initially seen as merely beautiful, revealed itself as a living record of power and politics. Each level's crystalline composition told the story of the family that resided there, their status reflected in the purity and complexity of their assigned chambers. She was currently following Princess Silara through a lesser-used corridor, their footsteps echoing off walls that thrummed with barely contained energy. These private passages had become their preferred meeting places, away from the wary eyes of the court. Your theory about the energy transmission networks is quite astute, Silara was saying, her internal light patterns shifting in what Sarah had learned to recognize as excitement. Few outsiders grasp how integral the crystal resonance is to our society. Sarah watched the play of light across Silara's form, still amazed at how expressive the patterns could be. It's fascinating how your architecture isn't just aesthetic, but functional. Every surface is part of your communication and energy distribution network. Indeed. Silara paused, her light dimming slightly. Though some believe my condition threatens that very network. They fear my touch could crystallize crucial systems, disrupting the flow that sustains our civilization. Sarah frowned. But you've never actually caused such disruption, have you? No, but fear rarely requires evidence. Silara's voice carried harmonics of old pain. The noble houses prefer to believe the worst. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden surge of energy through the corridor's walls. The crystal surfaces flared with warning patterns, and Silara grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her into an alcove. Sarah tensed, expecting the crystallization she'd been warned about, but felt only a cool, smooth touch. Something's wrong, Silara whispered, her form dimming to near transparency. The energy patterns, they're all wrong. This isn't an authorized power surge. Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in, analyzing the situation. Could it be a malfunction? No. Silara's response was firm. These patterns are deliberately masked. Someone's trying to hide their actions from the main network. Her eyes swirled with concern. We need to get to the core chamber. Now. They moved swiftly through the corridors, Silara leading them through passages that seemed to shift and change as they passed. Sarah realized the princess was actually manipulating the crystal structures, creating their path as they went. The core chamber houses the primary resonance crystal, Tylara explained as they descended. It's the heart of our civilization's power network. If someone were to disrupt it, she didn't need to finish the thought. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking a vast spherical chamber. At its center, a massive crystal pulsed with pure energy, sending waves of power through countless connecting channels. But something was wrong. Sarah could see dark patches spreading through the network, like ink through water. Corruption protocols. Tylara breathed, horror evident in her voice. They're trying to poison the network. Movement caught Sarah's eye. Figures in crystalline armor were positioning devices around the core crystal. Your Highness, those aren't maintenance workers, are they? No, those are members of House Obsidian. Tylara's light patterns shifted to something Sarah hadn't seen before. Rage. They've always opposed my claim to the throne, but this is treason. Sarah quickly assessed their options. The corrupted energy was spreading faster now, and she could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the spire. Can you stop it? Tylara's form pulsed with uncertainty. My touch, I could crystallize the corruption. Contain it. But she looked at her hands. If I lose control, I could freeze the entire network. Millions would lose power. The death toll would be catastrophic. You won't lose control. Sarah met Tylara's swirling eyes. I've watched you these past weeks. Your curse is a gift, one that could save your people right now. Trust yourself as I trust you. For a moment, Tylara stood motionless, her internal light shifting through complex patterns. Then she straightened, determination replacing fear. I'll need to get closer to the core. The guards, leave them to me. Sarah grinned, pulling out her diplomatic court sidearm and switching it to stun. Humanity didn't get this far in space by being helpless in a crisis. What followed was a carefully coordinated dance. Sarah provided covering fire, her stun blasts disrupting the crystalline armor of the House Obsidian guards. She drove them away from their positions, creating a path for Tylara to reach the core. The princess moved with unexpected grace, her crystalline form flowing like liquid light. When she reached the core, she pressed her hands against its surface. The effect was immediate. Crystalline patterns began spreading from her touch, but these were different from the corruption. Where the dark energy touched her crystals, it was contained, transformed. It's working. Tylara called out, her voice strained with effort. But there's so much corruption. I don't know if I can contain it all. Sarah fought her way to Tylara's side, dispatching the last guard with a well-placed shot. Without hesitation, she placed her hand on Tylara's shoulder. You can do this. Focus on my voice. Remember who you are, not what they fear you to be. The contact seemed to stabilize Tylara's power. The crystallization spread more rapidly now, but with precision and purpose. Within minutes, the corruption had been completely contained, transformed into inert crystal that could be safely removed from the network. As the crisis subsided and royal guards finally arrived at the chamber, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. Where her hand still rested on Tylara's shoulder, there was no crystallization. The princess noticed too, her light patterns expressing astonishment. How is this possible? Tylara whispered. No one has ever been able to touch me without being transformed. Before Sarah could respond, the chamber was swarming with security forces and royal advisors. But as they were separated for questioning, the two women shared a look of understanding. Something unprecedented had happened here, something that would have implications far beyond this one incident. The conspiracy had been thwarted, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be dealing with what they'd discovered about her apparent immunity to Tylara's touch and what it might mean for both their peoples. News of Sarah's immunity to Princess Tylara's crystallization touch spread through the primary spire like wildfire. The great halls buzzed with speculation, and Sarah found herself the subject of intense scrutiny from both the royal court and Lumini scientists. But it was the quiet moments with Tylara. in the privacy of the princess's personal chambers, that truly mattered. They want to study you, Xylara said, her crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the room's surfaces. The Royal Science Council has submitted a formal request for a full biological examination. Sarah stood by the chamber's viewing panel, watching the endless dance of light and crystal in the city below. Let them study me. If understanding why I'm immune can help your people accept you. It's not that simple. Xylara's light patterns shifted to show distress. House Obsidian's failed attempt to corrupt the core has made the other noble houses nervous. Some see your immunity as proof that humans pose a threat to our way of life. They fear you found a way to resist our natural defenses, while others see it as a sign that our species are meant to work together. Sarah completed the thought. Creating perfect polarization in your court. Precisely. Xylara moved closer, her presence causing the air to hum with energy. And now my father, the king, has called for a trial of worthiness. Sarah turned sharply. She'd read about the trials in the diplomatic briefings. Ancient ceremonies used to test those who sought alliance with the Lumini royal family. What exactly would this trial entail? The Chamber of Resonance. Xylara's voice carried harmonics of concern. You would have to navigate the crystal maze while subjected to pure energy frequencies. No non-Lumini has ever survived it. Sarah absorbed this information, her diplomatic training warring with her growing personal investment in the situation. And if I refuse, then all diplomatic relations between our peoples would be severed. House Obsidian and their allies would use it as proof that humans can't be trusted. Xylara's form dimmed. You would be forced to leave, and I would. She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Sarah had seen how the princess's isolation had begun to lift these past weeks, how her own people had started to look at her differently when they saw her interacting normally with Sarah. To return to that complete isolation would be cruel. Then I accept the trial, Sarah said firmly. Xylara's light flared in alarm. Sarah, no, you don't understand. The energy frequencies in the chamber. They could tear your molecular structure apart. You won't let that happen. Sarah stepped closer, deliberately placing her hand on Xylara's crystalline arm. We've proven that together, we can do things that are supposed to be impossible. The trial was set for the following day. Sarah spent the intervening time studying everything she could about Lumini energy manipulation, while carefully avoiding the concerned messages from her ship's crew. Dr. Evans had been particularly vocal about the risks, but Sarah knew this was necessary, not just for diplomacy, but for Xylara. The Chamber of Resonance proved to be even more intimidating than Sarah had imagined. It was a vast spherical space, its walls composed of crystals that seemed to shift and move of their own accord. The maze itself was created by intersecting energy fields, visible as sheets of pure light that moved in complex patterns. The king's voice echoed through the chamber as Sarah took her position at the entrance. Commander Sarah Chen, you stand before us to prove your worthiness through the ancient trial. Princess Xylara will guide you through her connection to the crystal networks. But be warned, one wrong move, one disruption of the energy fields, and the consequences will be fatal. Sarah looked up to where Xylara stood in a control booth, her form glowing with determination. Their eyes met, and an understanding passed between them. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The trial began. Sarah stepped into the maze, immediately feeling the pressure of the energy fields around her. Every hair on her body stood on end as she navigated through the shifting patterns. Xylara's voice in her mind, transmitted through the crystal network, became her lifeline. Left now. Wait. Now right. The princess's guidance was perfect, but the challenge grew increasingly difficult. The energy fields began to pulse with greater intensity, and Sarah could feel them trying to pull her apart at a molecular level. Halfway through the maze, something went wrong. The energy patterns shifted unexpectedly, and Sarah heard Xylara's cry of alarm. The controls aren't responding. Someone's overriding the safety protocols. Sarah found herself trapped between two converging energy fields, their power building to lethal levels. In the control booth, she could see Xylara fighting with the controls, her light patterns showing panic. The fields are going to collapse. Xylara's voice was desperate. Sarah, I can't stop it. In that moment, Sarah made a decision that went against every survival instinct. Then don't try to stop it. Come to me. What? I'll crystallize you. No, you won't. Trust me. Trust us. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Xylara's crystalline form phased through the booth's wall, dropping into the maze. She flew towards Sarah, her light leaving trails in the air. Just as the energy fields began to collapse, she reached Sarah's position. They came together in a fusion of human warmth and crystalline energy. Where their bodies met, instead of crystallization, a new kind of energy emerged, a harmony of organic and mineral that the chamber's sensors had never recorded before. The collapsing energy fields were absorbed, transformed, and redirected through their joint forms. When the dust settled, Sarah and Xylara stood at the maze's center, still holding each other. The chamber was silent. Every Lumini observer struck speechless by what they had witnessed. The impossible had become possible, and in doing so, had opened the door to changes that would reshape both their societies. The aftermath of the trial of worthiness sent shockwaves through Lumini society. The sight of Sarah and Xylara's energy merger had been broadcast throughout the crystal spires, and the recordings spread rapidly across both human and Lumini space. What had begun as a diplomatic mission was quickly becoming a catalyst for profound change. In the royal archives, Sarah and Xylara pored over ancient texts, searching for any precedent for their unique connection. The crystalline walls around them hummed with energy, responding to Xylara's agitated state. Look at this, Xylara said, her light patterns flickering with excitement. There's a prophecy from the First Age about the merging of star and crystal, when barriers fall and new light dawns. Sarah leaned closer, careful not to touch the delicate crystal manuscript. Your people's prophets had quite a flair for the dramatic. But it's too vague to be definitive. Perhaps, Xylara agreed, her form shifting through shades of blue that Sarah had learned indicated thoughtfulness. But it's given hope to those who want change. The younger houses are already calling it the Dawn Prophecy. Their research was interrupted by the arrival of Sentinel Prime, head of the Royal Guard. His crystalline armor pulsed with urgent patterns. Your Highness, Commander Chen, there's unrest in the lower spires. House Obsidian is rallying opposition against your connection. Sarah straightened, Diplomat's mind already analyzing implications. What kind of opposition? They're claiming the trial was corrupted, that the energy merger was a human trick to infiltrate our power networks. His pattern showed concern. Some of the more conservative houses are listening. Xylara's light dimmed with frustration. Of course they are. They've never wanted to see me take the throne. This is just another excuse to oppose progress. It's more than that. The Sentinel continued. They're calling for all humans to be expelled from Crystallos. There's talk of severing all diplomatic ties with Earth. Sarah felt her heart sink. Everything they'd worked for was at risk. But before she could respond, Xylara's form flared with sudden intensity. No, the princess declared, her voice carrying harmonics of royal authority. I won't let fear destroy this opportunity. Sentinel, summon the court. It's time they saw what this connection truly means. The Great Hall of Resonance was packed with representatives from every noble house. The crystalline architecture amplified their combined energy signatures, creating a cascade of light and color that reflected their turbulent emotions. Sarah stood beside Xylara on the central platform, aware that every eye in the vast chamber was fixed upon them. Noble houses of Crystallos, Xylara began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. For generations, you have feared my touch, seeing it as a curse that threatened our way of life. You isolated me, whispered that I was unfit to rule. Her light patterns shifted to display royal colors. But the arrival of humans, and specifically Commander Chen, has shown us another path. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah could see the opposition gathering, led by the obsidian-armored forms of House Obsidian's leadership. But Solara wasn't finished. What you saw in the trial wasn't a trick. It was proof that our peoples can achieve something extraordinary together. She turned to Sarah, extending her crystalline hand. "Show them." Sarah took Solara's hand without hesitation. The effect was immediate. Where their flesh met crystal, energy began to flow between them. But this time, they controlled it, channeled it. The hall's crystal networks responded, creating displays of light and energy that demonstrated the perfect harmony of their connection. "This is what we can become," Solara continued, her voice stronger now. "Not separate species fearful of our differences, but partners in building a future that benefits both our peoples." The leader of House Obsidian stepped forward, his dark crystalline form a sharp contrast to the light display. "Pretty words and prettier lights, Princess, but you would have us abandon millennia of tradition for this experiment." "No," Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice clear and confident. "We're asking you to expand your traditions, to grow beyond ancient fears and see the potential for something greater." She turned to address the entire hall. "Your people mastered crystal technology in ways humans can barely comprehend. My people have explored the stars, learning to adapt and change with every new world we encounter. Together, imagine what we could achieve." The hall erupted in debate, energy patterns flaring as arguments flew back and forth. But something was changing. The younger houses were moving to stand with Solara, their combined light creating a visible divide between progress and tradition. A new voice cut through the chaos. The king himself had arrived. His massive crystalline form dominated the chamber as he took in the scene before him. The hall fell silent, waiting for his judgment. "I have watched," he began, his voice carrying the weight of ages, "as my daughter struggled with what we thought was a curse. I have watched as she found understanding with a human who showed no fear. And now I watch as our society stands at a crossroads." His gaze swept the chamber. "Change is not easy, but neither is it something we can prevent. The question is not whether to change, but how we will face it." The king's support shifted the balance. One by one, more houses began to align with Solara's position. Even some of the older houses, seeing the way the tide was turning, began to moderate their opposition. As the political landscape shifted before their eyes, Sarah felt Solara's hand tighten in hers. The princess's light patterns were showing something new, hope tinged with another emotion that made Sarah's heart race. They had won this battle, but both knew the real challenge lay ahead. Changing hearts and minds would take more than one dramatic display. But as they stood together, human and Lumini united, they were ready to face whatever came next. 3 months after the confrontation in the Great Hall, the primary spire hummed with unprecedented energy. Representatives from both Earth and Crystallos gathered for what would become known as the Dawn Ceremony, the formal recognition of the alliance between their peoples, symbolized by a ritual that had never been attempted between species. Sarah stood before a mirror in her preparation chamber, adjusting the ceremonial robe that had been created specifically for this occasion. The fabric was interwoven with Lumini crystals, causing it to shimmer with every movement. Dr. Evans watched from the doorway, still looking concerned. "The latest scans showed changes in your cellular structure," he said, reviewing his datapad. "The repeated energy exchanges with Princess Solara have altered you on a fundamental level. We don't fully understand the long-term implications." Sarah met his eyes in the mirror. "But you haven't detected any negative effects, have you?" "No," he admitted reluctantly. "If anything, your body seems to be adapting, becoming more efficient at energy processing. But as your doctor, I have to point out that we're in uncharted territory. That's where humanity does its best work, Doctor." Sarah smiled, touching one of the crystals on her robe. It responded to her, glowing softly, something that should have been impossible for a human to achieve. Sometimes we have to trust in more than just science. The ceremony would take place in the Chamber of Unity, an ancient space that hadn't been used in generations. Its walls were composed of the purest crystal on crystallos, capable of amplifying and channeling energy in ways that even the Lumini didn't fully understand. As Sarah entered, she felt the familiar resonance that now seemed to be a constant part of her life. The chamber was divided between human and Lumini observers, but Sarah noted with satisfaction that many had chosen to mix, creating a beautiful blend of flesh and crystal throughout the space. At the center, beneath a dome that opened to the binary stars above, stood Princess Sci-Fi. Sarah's breath caught at the sight of her. Sci-Fi's crystalline form had been transformed for the ceremony, her usual transparency replaced with a rainbow of colors that shifted and flowed like the aurora borealis. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Sarah felt the now familiar surge of energy between them. The king's voice echoed through the chamber, enhanced by the crystal networks. We gather today to witness not just an alliance between worlds, but the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The merging of star and crystal, the dawn of a new age. Sarah began her walk to the center, feeling the weight of history in every step. The traditional words of the ceremony had been modified for this unprecedented occasion, but their meaning remained the same, a pledge of unity, of bridging differences to create something new. As she reached Sci-Fi, the princess's light patterns shifted to display emotions too complex for words. They had rehearsed this moment, but nothing could have truly prepared them for the reality. In the ancient traditions of our people, Sci-Fi spoke, her voice carrying harmonics of joy and nervousness. A kiss seals the bond between souls. But my touch has always brought crystallization, ending life rather than celebrating it. Until you. Sarah reached up, gently touching Sci-Fi's crystalline cheek. Energy flowed between them, visible now to all observers as patterns of light that danced around their forms. Your touch doesn't end life, Sci-Fi. It transforms it, just as you've transformed me. The chamber's crystal walls began to pulse in rhythm with their combined energy as they drew closer. When their lips finally met, the effect was beyond anything their scientists had predicted. The energy of their kiss radiated outward, charging the chamber's crystal networks with a new form of power, a perfect synthesis of organic and mineral, of human adaptation and Lumini stability. The chamber erupted in light, the crystal walls displaying images from both their cultures, Earth's oceans and forests merging with Crystallos's geometric beauty, creating visions of possible futures where both species grew together. The prophecy's words appeared in crystal fire. When star and crystal merge, barriers fall and new light dawns. But Sarah and Sci-Fi barely noticed the display. In that moment, they weren't symbols or leaders or even representatives of their species. They were simply two beings who had found something extraordinary in each other. When they finally parted, the chamber was silent with awe. The king stepped forward, his own light patterns showing deep emotion. The bond is sealed, the alliance confirmed. Let this day be remembered as the beginning of a new era for both our peoples. The celebration that followed was like none either world had seen before. Humans and Lumini mingled freely, sharing stories and dreams for the future. Scientists from both species were already discussing the implications of the energy merger, while cultural exchanges were being planned at all levels of society. Later that night, Sarah and Sci-Fi stood on a private balcony overlooking the Crystal City. The binary stars had set, leaving the spires to glow with their own inner light. Their hands remained joined, energy flowing freely between them. "Do you ever regret it?" Sci-Fi asked softly, taking that first risk, touching someone everyone else feared. Sarah turned to her, seeing not a crystalline being or a princess, but simply the one she loved. "Never. Some things are worth any risk." Sci-Fi's form glowed with happiness. "The scientists say that what we can do together breaks all known laws of physics. Then we'll help them write new laws." Sarah smiled. "After all, isn't that what love is supposed to do? Change the impossible into possible." As if in response, their combined energy created a display of light that danced across the crystal spires, a promise of the wonders yet to come. Two worlds, two species, two hearts, united not in spite of their differences, but because of them. And somewhere in the vast depths of space, other worlds and other species watched and wondered as the light of this new dawn began to spread among the stars.